Amazing. Cool. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We are here to discuss how to build a brand that people fall in love with. It's a subject matter that Sirish and I are both really passionate about. And we'll talk a little bit about our backgrounds and where we come from. But this event is really special because it's in collaboration with our partners at Worklife and the Copy Club. And we'll be talking a little bit about them today too. So hello, my name is Michael. I head up the marketing team at ProQuo AI. ProQuo is an AI-powered brand management platform that's helping hundreds of brands be certain behind the decisions that they're making daily. And before ProQuo, I spent 10 years at Unilever, working in their US, UK, and Australasian businesses, specifically in brand management and brand building. So building brands that consumers fall head over heels for, hopefully. And I'm joined by our head of growth, Sirish Sadik. Sirish, do you want to say a bit about yourself?
Of course. So I'm the head of growth, as you've now seen and heard. And before I worked at ProQuo, I've been here for about 2 years. Before I worked at ProQuo, I worked in advertising as a strategist. So I worked at Droga 5, BBH, and Grey London on loads of different clients, from sort of Vodafone to Bird's Eye to perfume to, I mean, it's kind of like you name a category, I've had a whirl at it. So kind of the opposite of Michael in some ways.
Thanks, Sirish. I should also add, I don't always wear a ProQuo shirt, even though I head up the marketing team. It's a coincidence today. All right, well, let's kick into it, Sirish. Jess has joined us. Jess works at Worklife, and they are an amazing partner of ours at ProQuo. So thank you, Jess, for helping us collaborate on this event today. I was wondering if you'd want to give a brief overview on Worklife as a company.
Yeah, absolutely. So hi to any Worklife members we have here. And for anybody who doesn't know about us, we are a workspace brand. We have co-working spaces in London, Reading and Manchester. And our kind of USP is that our spaces are places that teams want to come to and that kind of encourage team happiness and workplace happiness. As you can see, with a beautiful yellow background, which Saoirse pointed out, we're all about happiness. So that's us. And then with regards to ProQuo, we started using ProQuo in January of this year. I'm sure we'll go into this more later, but it's really helped us kind of grow our brand. And actually, this was the session that I came to that made us start using ProQuo. So you're in for a treat.
Thanks, Jess. And a huge shout out to our friends at the Copy Club. We've been partners with the Copy Club for quite a while now. I think it was September last year. And they're an amazing group of people that lead trainings. They have courses. They do a matchmaking service. If anyone here is looking for new hiring, we've hired people through the Copy Club to work at ProQuo, and they are London's largest entrepreneurial network of marketers. So big shout out to them as well. And at ProQuo, we do these events once a month. We call them What the Facts, which are kind of frequently asked questions that get answered in the world of brand management. So today we're talking about how to build a brand that people fall in love with and how you can build a really strong relationship that's exchanged between your brand and people. But we've also done talks on how can you get your product listed in retail stores. If you have a product that you're going toe-to-toe with a buyer, how do you make sure that you're going to get that product on shelf? How do you create a new product development that's going to really meet the needs of people? We've done talks on how to kind of create amazing communication and how to know that it's optimized and ready for liftoff. So we do these once a month. So if you like what you've heard today, or what you will hear today, please come and join us again. We'd love to have you. So ProQuo AI, we are an AI-powered brand management platform specifically designed for marketers who want to grow their brands with certainty. We know that every brand manager has a commercial goal, and within our platform, what you can simply do is upload what that commercial objective is. Maybe you want to grow market share, you want to disrupt your category, whatever your commercial goal is, you tell that to ProQuo, and ProQuo gives you a custom action plan to achieve that commercial objective. We speak to people every day about your brand, your competition, and your category. We understand the dynamics of people's relationships with your brand, your competition, and your category. And we use that real-time analysis to tell you what marketing decisions you should be making every day to realize that commercial goal. So we'll be talking a lot about relationships today. They're fundamental to ProQuo. Why we're called ProQuo in the first place is we believe that people stick in relationships so long as they get out more than they put into them. And we'll unpick all of that for you in this session. So let's get into it. In the chat, we've got some people fielding the comments here, but in the chat, why don't we start by just dropping in a few names of brands that come top of mind, brands that you love. Say, I love brand X or I love brand Y, brands that you maybe don't love or that you've fallen in love with, that your relationship somehow changed. Or tell us the brands that you represent. Let's take a minute to get those out there because we're going to be talking a lot about brands today. And it'll be interesting to see for those on the call, what brands come top of mind, brands that you love. I see Nike, Gatorade, Apple, very good. Wendy's, Twitter, Naked Wines, National Trust. Come on, some detest. What have we fallen out of love with? Goop. Interesting. And what brands are you guys represent? Old Spice, maybe fallen out of love. Hate Wells Fargo, there we go. Oatly, okay.
Oh God, Old Spice. Got to get into that, Zoe.
That's fantastic. And you may not know why, or you may think that you know why you love or leave a brand. And there is a science behind that fact. And that's what we're going to unpick a bit later on. So keep these brands that you've mentioned in the back of your minds as we go through today. And think about your own brand that you represent and how, based off of what you learn, Saoirse and I speak about, you can relate that to your own product or service. So today's agenda, we're going to start with why relationships are important. We're going to talk about the science that makes up relationships. And we'll talk as well about the ingredients. There are 16 things which comprise the relationship that people have with brands. And then we'll finish by looking at really killer examples of brands that are majoring on different aspects of their relationship with people in a really great way. And we'll give some guidance and some actionable next steps about how you can build your own brand's relationship with people too. So I'm going to pass the mic over to Saoirse, and she's going to talk about why relationships are important.
Over to me. I mean, obviously in your lives, I'm not going to mansplain to you why your relationships are important. I think that's pretty fundamental in life, isn't it? Got to make sure you've got good relationships. But it's an interesting point. You know, at ProQuo, we kind of question what a relationship is. And I suppose the technical definition is that it's the connection between two concepts or objects or people. You know, the wind and the rain have a relationship. Electricity and wires have relationships. You and your shopkeeper have relationships. But what does that actually mean for brands? And why is it important? And really it's important because we live in a world where brands no longer really have tangible difference between them often. So in loads of categories, each product is kind of a very similar, slightly different version of the same thing. What becomes different is the kind of face you put on that brand. So an example I always use here is toothpaste, which is, I walk into my local supermarket and there's like 10 types of toothpaste. They all are the same. They're all minty, mostly. They'll all stop plaque. They all come in a tube. They've got all the same benefits. You know, occasionally one says it makes it a bit whiter and one says that it's for sensitive teeth or whatever. But fundamentally, there's very little that's actually different about those products. And so brands have to find that way to be the brand that gets chosen. You have to understand what makes people want to interact with you. And that's why when I walk into the supermarket and I look at all those toothpastes, I know exactly which one I'm going to pick. It's Oral-B for anyone who's interested. But I always pick up Oral-B because something about them has understood my needs and what I want and how I feel better than any other brand out there. And that's why you have to break down what your relationship is with your customers, with your consumers, to be able to then deliver it. You need to be able to measure it properly so that you can then action it properly. So, what is a relationship? What's the science behind it? As Michael mentioned, people stay in relationships when they feel like they're getting more than they're giving. So this is something called the theory of social exchange, and it's true across many, many areas of life. But for example, you know, with your parents, everyone think of your mum for a minute. She's probably given you more positives than negatives, right? You know, that she birthed you. Your life is owed to her, and you probably get a lot of reassurance from your mum. It's not the case with everyone, though. Lots of people get lots of negatives, and when those negatives start to outweigh the positives, you suddenly realize that you've got a very difficult relationship with your parents. So it's exactly the same for brands. If the exchange is in favor of the consumer, they will stick with you, they will love you longer and more intensely. It kind of deepens that relationship. And that obviously leads to increased usage, so more frequency, but also greater spend, obviously. So it's true for brands, it's true for your parents. It's also true, I think a good example is always romantic relationships or your partner. You know, you have that moment where you weigh up, is this the right relationship for me to be in or not? And that decides whether or not you continue to invest in the relationships. So successful relationships are all about, am I getting more than I'm giving? And that's what we call a positive quid pro quo, which, as Michael said, is why we're called ProQuo. That's how much we believe in relationships. So what is a relationship actually made of? We know why it's important. We know what makes you stick in one, but how do you look at them? The best way to look at a relationship is through the way that the mind works. So there's system 1 and there's system 2. I'm sure you guys have heard those names before. System 1 is your subconscious. It's your fast, automatic, intuitive understanding of things. It's so fast, it happens honestly in under a second, and it's predictive of what we're going to then go on to do. 95% of our decisions are made subconsciously. So being able to access that and understand that is really, really critical in knowing what someone is then going to go on to do. Your system 2, on the other hand, is conscious. So it's much slower, it's much more deliberate, it's much more rule governed. And it's the kind of thing you're sort of if you're writing an essay, you're using your system 2. If you're having a conversation, you're largely using your system 2. And only a very small percentage of decisions are made using that. What becomes fascinating is when you place these two together, they're both happening in your mind at the same time, and they are what makes up a relationship. A good example of this, I think, is if you put a chocolate bar in front of someone on a diet, or in fact, I'm not on a diet, but in front of me, I will always go, oh my God, that is delicious. My system 1 is like, delicious, yum, love chocolate, wish I could have it. Yeah, I just want to eat it now. But my system 2 is saying, well, Saoirse, you're actually allergic to that chocolate bar, so you probably shouldn't have it. It's going to be bad for you if you're going to have an allergic reaction. For most people, it's probably like, that's very unhealthy. It's bad for you. I shouldn't have it. I'm trying to stay away from chocolate. So your system 1 and your system 2 are giving you two very mixed messages. What will almost definitely happen is that if you walk into a supermarket and that's your view of chocolate, you will end up picking up a chocolate bar and walking out with it, but you won't feel good about it because your system 1 has very powerfully expressed that you really want it, but your system 2 has made you feel guilty. It's made you think, oh, no, not again. I didn't want to do that. So what that gives marketers and the world of brands is a really important view into what that relationship with a brand is comprised of. So what you then understand is, okay, we have a really powerful asset here. We've got something that is so seductive, like makes people just desperately want it. But there's a lot of barriers that make people, you know, not want to actually have it, not want to enjoy it. It's kind of burst the bubble for some people. So as a marketer, you can then make a decision to play up the seductiveness of the chocolate, but to allay the fears that the system too is bringing in. That way, you'll make sure that you overcome that barrier through doing marketing about the deliciousness of chocolate, or this is just off the top of my head, so it's not the world's best idea. Or, you know, saying that your chocolate is healthier than ever before or something, which is why that's something that lots of chocolate brands choose to do. So by looking at these two things, you can get a really clear prediction of how people are going to behave based on the relationship they have with your brand. Using a kind of live example, I think hopefully everyone's familiar with Uber, whether or not they have it where they are. It's a sort of a global thing now, isn't it? This is the response that we get across how people feel about Uber. So this is their system one. And you can break it down into these 16 sort of drivers that we have here. And through breaking it down in this granular way, and by using that system one prediction, you can understand where Uber is really struggling and where Uber is really dominating. So for example, all of these down here are really bright green. These are all the sort of rational drivers. People are really clear about what Uber is. They think it's relevant to them. They think it's consistent. They think it's good value for money. They think it's familiar and so easy to use. So Uber is absolutely very strong in the rational sense. However, you can see through these three dark reds up here, they have a massive problem in their sort of emotional persuasion. People don't like that they aren't transparent. They feel like they hide things, and they don't feel like they have integrity. They don't always do the right thing. I think those two are due to the sort of numerous and seemingly never-ending challenges that Uber has, you know, getting banned from cities, sexual harassment in the workplace, avoiding taxes, all that kind of stuff. And what that leads to is people not feeling a connection with the Uber brand. I think this is very true when you think about Uber. You think very pervasive in my life. I'm very aware of it. I know a lot of people use it. I use it myself. But I don't like it. I don't have any sort of positivity towards Uber. I don't wish them the best. I don't want them to do well particularly because I don't have an emotional connection with them. And that's representative of how most people feel here. So they're innovative, they understand what you need, but here's the problem. And so if I was a competitor to Uber, like Lyft or Bolt or anything like that, this is where I would make my heart land because this is where Uber is weakest. So by understanding what the component parts of your relationship are, you can start to understand where your brand should be playing and where your brand should be reinforcing itself. Where are your opportunities and where are you vulnerable to challenges? Hope everyone's sticking with me. I can see the chat. Good. So,
there's a question in the chat actually around how that particular system one data is collected.
This data is collected through a technique called implicit response timing. What that does is it measures the subconscious, which is the system one, and essentially it does it through the speed with which you respond to particular statements. So it's a framework that we've used, I think, across thousands, tens of thousands of brands at this point. And it accesses how people truly feel about your brand. Happy to go into the details of how that all works offline if you'd like, Zoe. No worries. So what makes up a brand's relationship with people? There are four kind of key areas that you can break down your brands into. And if you have the brand in mind that you kind of thought of at the beginning, I think it's really interesting to put it through these 4 filters. So the ability to pull people towards it. How much does the brand seduce people, make them excited, make them want to like go towards it? How much does it make people see its character, its personality? The next question is what it does and how it behaves. So what's its activation in market like? How is it, what is it actually doing? Do you relate to that? Do you like that? Is that what you want to see from a brand? So that's more about sort of its persuasion. How much is it doing what you want it to do? Then how powerful it is at prompting an emotional reaction. So is it creating that emotional response in you? Is it making you, I don't know, feel something? And then how powerful its offering is. So what is it like? What is it actually laying on the table for you that you could have? Is that what you want? Is it relevant to you? Does its promise sound like something you'd want? So the way that you can use these kind of 4 components are across the brand that you work at or you're thinking of now, your category. So you can also look at this. For example, the flower category is one I came across recently. Sorry if anyone works in flower here, but it's not a particularly seductive category. People aren't like, God, yeah, flower, got to know more about that, got to run towards it. So it's not very seductive. However, flour is massively important in an enormous amount of cooking. So its offering is really strong. It's very rationally attractive because, everyone wants to use it. So you can look at it to understand the entire category and your brand, but also, of course, your competition. Are you behaving in a way that's more attractive than your competitors? Are you activating better than them? These are all questions you can interrogate. So what we thought we'd do now is have a look at these kind of segments. We've got 4 kind of lenses to look through, which are a combination of these. So how good is your brand at pulling people towards it emotionally? We've got 4 examples here. So one of the questions that you should be asking to understand if your brand is doing a good job at pulling people in emotionally is how attractive is your brand? How does it make people feel? How does it look to people? Kind of what face is it presenting? A brand that's really, really good at this is Apple. I think we all have Apple advertising sort of wedged into our brains from a young age. But the iconic iPod bouncing across the screen, even still the shots they do of their products, they have established an enormous amount of credibility in making their brands seem hugely attractive. Worklife actually is a great example of a brand that understands people's wants and needs. So how much empathy do you actually have for what your customers want? Worklife's proposition is all about, this isn't an ad, by the way, this was just like a convenient thing that we came across. Worklife's proposition is understanding that your area of work is not just where you get stuff done. And the best that you can get out from people is when they're happiest in all of the surrounding areas, so that they're sort of stimulated intellectually, they've got places to be social, they're comfortable in their day. It's the whole world around working that needs to be right. And understanding all of those individual needs and wants actually creates the place that you want to spend your working life. Nike is a good example of a brand who is super desirable. I mean, they've been investing in Just Do It for as long as time, it seems. But what they've built is through, influencer collaborations, through powerful advertising, through sponsorships, all that kind of stuff, a brand that is hugely aspirational. It's a brand that people look up to. Every sports brand wants to be more like Nike. Every person wants to be like Nike. And actually, it's a lot to do with their proposition as well, which I'm going to absolutely butcher this, but it's something like, inspire and enable the athlete in everybody. Anybody with a body is an athlete. I told you I'd butcher it. But that kind of inclusive and yet rallying feel to the brand makes it really feel special. And then we've got Dyson. Dyson has a very singular focus, which is innovation. They come up with new products. They think laterally about what shape that product should be in. They don't sort of get held to the industry norms. So they think in a very original and forward-thinking way about the types of products that they can create. So they're an extremely innovative brand in that sense. Innovative doesn't, by the way, always mean that you're coming up with new products and new ideas and all of that. It's actually just that you fundamentally think originally and challenge kind of the status quo a little bit. I, for one, was surprised back in the day when they went into hair from Hoovers. Felt like quite a wild leap, but I've heard the Dyson Airwrap is fantastic.
Serge, I was wondering if we should ask those listening in to drop in the chat any kind of examples from brands that they've come across that do a really good job, either at driving things like attraction or aspiration or empathy or innovation. These are the four things that Serge is talking about that can seduce people towards a brand in a really emotional way. Are there any examples out there that you can think of?
Coca-Cola, Lululemon, Peloton on innovation, I agree. They've been really interesting. Lululemon, which one is that for? Maybe desirability, aspiration, perhaps. I think that's true. Audi, very desirable. They've always invested in making themselves seem kind of a cut above the rest, if you'll forgive me, but also attractive. I mean, Jesus, the whole car industry talks about being attractive the whole time. All of those ads are how the light gleams off the car and like how it's driving through some, I don't know, suburban place. Samsung, probably quite innovative. And I would argue Samsung actually wins on empathy over Apple. I quite regularly have this argument and a lot of people don't agree with me, but I think that they understand what people want from a phone more than Apple does, which is quite constrictive. Dior for attractive. Yeah, probably all of those sort of high fashion houses invest really heavily in attractiveness, but also desirability. I mean, Tiffany's, Rolex, Dior, Chanel, all of them, that almost their sole focus is creating a sense of desirability. That's how they justify that higher price, of course.
Do you think gyms, Serge, came through?
Yeah, Box, One Rebel. I mean, One Rebel is very sort of exclusive, isn't it? It's interesting. Exclusive is often almost seen as synonymous with aspiration. You know, that to be desirable, you have to be exclusive. It's not the case. Actually, perhaps demonstrated very well by the next one, which is Tesla. You know, they're trying to make that as accessible as possible. They're trying to sell. I can't remember what Elon Musk's target was last year, but it was ridiculous. He wants everyone in the world to be driving a Tesla as soon as possible. And they're kind of democratizing electric vehicles. So I think there's that interesting interplay between exclusivity and aspiration. Shall I crack on to the next one?
Let's do it.
So this one is how good is your brand at pulling people towards it rationally? Maybe just drop suggestions into the chat as we go, if you like. A really good example of a brand that has a clear role in your life, which is, you know, about clarity and understanding a brand's purpose, is Uber. So Uber about getting you from A to B, very simple. You know when to use an Uber, you know how to use an Uber, you know, it's almost so straightforward, it's hard to explain. which is funny because they created their own category. Nothing like them had really existed before. They really deeply changed the role of taxis in people's lives. And I think that was one of their smartest sort of judo flips, if you will. IKEA. So how well does your brand provide for people's needs and wants? So how much does it actually give people what they're looking for? I mean, I don't know if you guys have been to IKEA recently, but I think they have everything you could ever want, from food to desks to, I don't know, those little holdy things. IKEA really understand their audience. They understand what people want. It's to start a home, it's to fill a home, and it's to do things really easily with as little DIY as possible. So IKEA, I think, are real front runners in that particular driver. How well does your brand keep its promise of performance? So a brand has told you, here's what we'll do for you. How well does it actually deliver on that? I mean, God, Red Bull is a real tour de force of a brand anyway, isn't it? But I think their promise is, as I'm sure we've all seen in their advertising, Red Bull gives you wings. So they give you so much energy that you'll basically feel like you can fly. Having had a Red Bull in my life, I can agree that that's true. Definitely delivers on it. My heart rate was through the roof. But what they do incredibly well is demonstrate that truth across multiple touch points and in many ways. So not only does the brand, the actual product, come through and deliver, Red Bull literally went so far as to drop someone from space to show just how well Red Bull can make you feel like you're flying. They sponsor all the grassroots sports, you know, to demonstrate how much energy they bring to things. I think they really deliver on what they promise to consumers. And then differentiation, you know, how much does your brand actually stand out in the crowd? Again, thinking of the brands that you had in your mind, how different is it truly? How much would you pick it out of a lineup next to the other brands it competes against? A good example of this one is Slack. I mean, in all honesty, Slack's like no other, isn't it? Again, it's kind of owning a category. I suppose now it competes with Discord, and I suppose it competes with Microsoft a lot as well. But they've really owned a space, and there's no one quite like them. There's no one that looks quite like them. There's no one that works quite like them. And they've focused really heavily on innovation and iteration, as opposed to explicit marketing. Does anyone have any that they think fit into any of these four categories? Kind of clarity, relevance, performance, or differentiation? Drop them in the chat. I feel like this is live fire. I don't know what's coming. Could be anything.
Target. Relevance, yeah.
I mean, goodness, Target do so many things, don't they? They do fashion, they do homeware, they do it all. I suppose they've taken quite a broad view of how to cater to people's needs by trying to cater to kind of everything anyone would ever want from a shop. Yeah, the makeup section. Absolutely. Everything under the sun in there.
Fever Tree.
Fever Tree, for which one? Stand out in a crowd, maybe? ASOS for wants and needs. Yeah, oh my God, I bought something on ASOS again the other day after having sworn off it. It's just so relevant and so convenient that it is almost impossible to avoid, isn't it? Absolutely brilliant.
Seriously, it's interesting, maybe to share a bit about performance, because that does change depending on the category that everyone here might be working in.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, maybe we'll take Fever Tree as a good example. You know, you can make different promises to your consumers. Largely, if you work within food and bev, you tend to be making a promise of taste. You know, you promise to be saying, you'll enjoy this, it will taste good, it will be amazing. And so what we measure then is the delivery of that taste. Whereas, for example, if you look at a perfume, it's much more about smell. If you look at a shaving brand, it's much more about how clean the shave is, for example. So depending on your category and depending on your brand, you make different promises, which you then fulfill to people. Let's crack on to the next one, shall we? You want to take it, Michael?
Yeah, I'll take it. So we've just covered kind of the idea of pulling people towards you emotionally and rationally through seduction. Now we're going to look at the other side of the equation, which Serge talked about, which was called persuasion, which relates to how a brand's kind of activation is seen in market. And those can be emotional and rational as well. So we've got 4 examples here specifically on emotion. The first is Whole Foods Market. So thinking about the brand that you work for, brands you've experienced, you can consider how well that brand can relate to how you relate to it, I suppose, as a consumer. So Whole Foods, I'm in New York City at the moment, and it is quite an experience. Very strong connection. Obviously, they're like synonymous with like healthy eating. If you're into that, if you have dietary restrictions, if you've got needs and wants, you can go to Whole Foods and generally relate to the way that that brand is behaving in the in-store experience. Ben and Jerry's, does the brand always seem to do the right things? This idea of integrity and in terms of the behavior of a brand can drive really strong relationships with people. Ben and Jerry's kind of support social causes. They're very reactive in the way that they present themselves. They're not afraid to take a stand and to stand for something. Their integrity recently has come into question if you've seen the news, but historically they've been a fantastic example of a brand that has always seemed to do the right thing when faced with a choice. The third example we have is Chipotle. In terms of a brand that people feel is really open and honest, you can think of this like how transparent is your brand with people. There was an amazing advert. I'll never forget it, actually. It must have been now like 5 to 7 years ago, probably 7 years ago, that was kind of like a claymation, almost like animated film that showed Chipotle's supply chain getting from like farm into store.
That was so good.
So good. I don't know where it debuted, but it was Willie Nelson was the track, and he was doing a cover of Coldplay's The Scientist. It's like, it's extremely strong. So I would recommend YouTube it, type in Willie Nelson Coldplay The Scientist Chipotle, and you'll find it. But it showed kind of the end-to-end production of where their ingredients came from in a really open and honest way. There was actually a brand on ProQuo called Pippin Nut. They went on Inside the Factory, and they saw their transparency scores start to lift because they were promoting to the public just how their product was produced end to end. And finally, Netflix, a really great example of a brand that kind of majors on popularity. All 4 of these examples, you know, the connection that you feel when you walk into a Whole Foods Market, or the integrity that's possessed by Ben and Jerry's, or the transparency that's possessed by Chipotle, and the popularity that, you know, the social proof aspect where everyone is watching Netflix, the popularity that your brand possesses with the public. All 4 of those things are drivers of persuasion emotionally, in ways that your brand can relate to people in a strong way. I'm curious to hear, this is a really powerful quadrant where we're looking at, are there any examples that you can think of brands that are really transparent, super popular, or a brand that you relate to, or one that you feel has high integrity? Loads out there. Tom's great example. B Corp, yeah. Yeah, Patagonia was in my mind for sure. Allbirds, yeah. Yeah. Amy's, very good. B Corp's an interesting one because obviously it takes a heck of a lot to get B Corp certified, and you need to prove that not only do you possess those attributes, but that you maintain them. So you as a brand can't be a one-hit wonder when you're going for B Corp certification. You have to withhold that consistency. Brewdog, despite recent bad press. Yeah. Let's go for one more and then we'll carry on to the final 4 examples. Anyone else got a good one out there? Tony's, there you go. To go with Brewdog, they collaborated recently. Tony's are also a ProQuo subscriber, and they do indeed see really powerful marks in this particular part of their relationship. I thought I was driving for a second. Classic. I tried to advance the slides for myself. Thanks, Serge. The last quadrant we've got is still within this idea of persuasion, looking more rationally. We've got 4 examples here. So reliability and consistency, like how well does your brand, how well can people rely on your brand to be the same everywhere that they experience it? McDonald's, an incredible brand, a huge brand. They own the letter M, the golden arches. You can walk into a McDonald's anywhere on the planet, and while they might kind of alter their menu for like regional flavors, you know that the experience is going to be the same time and time again. So consistency in terms of the way that a brand behaves can seriously drive the relationship that people feel with it. Similarly, Amazon, so this idea of being really accessible, easy to use, easy to get a hold of. You can buy anything off of Amazon or Amazon Prime with your phone with a swipe, and you can be certain that it's going to be delivered before 10 p.m. the next day. You receive notifications that it's on the way. They're in control of that experience, and the accessibility of it is what makes them so successful. Someone mentioned Samsung earlier. Samsung has really high scores all around. It's one of the strongest brands in terms of its relationship strength with people. But here we can look at kind of Samsung's ability to justify its cost. Value for money can drive in a really strong way people's relationship with your brand. And it isn't whether or not your brand is expensive or cheap. It's actually whether or not your brand is worth paying for. So we have really great examples of premium products that have really strong value for money because the overall relationship that they've built with their consumers and the experience of their product is worth the cost of it. And finally, we've got Instagram. This kind of final driver is all about familiarity. So how well do people feel they know your brand? So brand awareness can be quite superficial. Yes, I've heard of it, but really, what do you know about it? An example that we often use is a brand like Kia. Sorry if anyone drives it or has previously worked on their brand, but I'm aware of Kia, but I just don't know much about that brand. It doesn't have depth to it. So how can you, as a brand manager, create depth behind the product or service that you guys are managing? Are there any examples out there that you guys can relate with around either a brand that you feel super consistent, maybe one that's really easy to get a hold of, easy to use, something that you feel really is worth paying for, or even something that you feel you've got a really deep knowledge of? Marriott, yeah, for consistency. Know what you're going to get. Hilton, yeah, sticking with the category. Hotels, yeah. Monzo, yeah. For those in the US, I think Monzo, I don't think has penetrated the US market yet, no, but a banking app where you can easily understand kind of how you're spending cash. You can send and settle bills quite easily. They've really shaken up financial services in my mind, like a really big category targeting a younger crowd. Really well done. Netflix, yes. A very popular brand, but also one that you feel maybe justifies its cost, easy to use. Yeah, hits a few Specsavers. Absolutely. Lululemon strikes again. Yes.
And that's actually a really important point on Lululemon that you've made there, Jessica, which is it's expensive, but they make you feel like it's worth it. It's important to think about the value as the justification of the cost, not just the price itself. And they do that really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Thank you.
Oh my God, Greg's. Thank you, Hannah.
Greg's.
Most reliable feeling brand. For anyone in the US, they're a small coffee shop that make, or a chain coffee shop that make great sausage rolls.
For those in the US that don't know what a sausage roll is, Serge.
Okay, I don't know how to translate that one.
We digress. Never heard of it described as a coffee shop, apparently.
I didn't know where to go with it. How do you describe Greg's? It's like trying to describe McDonald's. I don't know.
Quick service. I don't know. Maybe. All right. Grubby takeaway sandwich. Fantastic. Building your brand's relationship with people. So we've looked at 16 different kind of drivers of a brand's relationship with people. And we've given kind of examples of brands that are majoring on particular aspects. Every single brand has an opportunity to build their relationship with consumers across 16 different facets of what comprises a relationship that people have with brands. And we've talked about all 16 of these things today. And just to reiterate how we look at your brand's relationship with people, whether you're on ProQuo or not, you can take these 16 drivers to heart and consider how you can build your brand's relationship with people in a really strong way. And they're, as we've explained, half of them relate to how well your brand seduces people towards it on an emotional and rational level. How good is your brand at pulling people into it? How attractive and aspirational is it? How empathetic and innovative is it? How clear is its role? How well does it serve its purpose? How relevant is it? How different is it? All of those 8 things pull people in on an emotional and a rational level to your brand. Equally, there's drivers of persuasion, which are all about how your brand's perceived to behave and activate and present itself and market. And those are emotional and rational too. So they're things like, do I relate to the brand? Is it a transparent one? Does it possess integrity? Is it a popular brand? And rational ones like, how reliable and consistent is the brand? Is the brand worth paying for? Can I get a hold of it and use it easily? And do I know a thing or two about it? It's the sum of those 16 things that make up a strong relationship with consumers. It's something that at ProQuo, we have a real-time analysis that looks at your brand and your competition and your category daily across these 16 things to understand the strength of your relationship all the way down to an individual driver level. And we look at your brand, but if we advance one slide, we start by looking at what's important in the category, because not every driver is going to be, so some drivers will be expected. We talked about Uber, right? And that was a very rational brand and quite a rational category. I'm curious if anyone can drop into the chat. What do you think this category is? It's a hard question, but you can see green is good. Green is what people expect most from this category. And the dark red is maybe what people expect least from this category. So you can see it is lacking or maybe unexpected in emotional seduction, but a little bit rational. Any thoughts on what this could be? A category where people want it to perform well. They want to be able to get a hold of it easily. They're happy to use it if other people are, and they feel something, they know a thing or two about it. They want to know a thing or two about the brands here. Someone mentioned this brand, this category rather, in this call at some stage. That's a hint. Banking, tequila. Drinks are getting closer. It happens to alcohol close, mixers. so hand in hand, yeah, mixers indeed. Yeah, it's actually tonics. So within the world of tonic waters, what people feel they really need, what's expected most, is a really great tasting, popular, accessible, and familiar product. What they're not necessarily expecting are things like aspiration, empathy, innovation, and differentiation. The reason why is oftentimes people's relationship with a category are shaped by the market leading brand in that category. So what they know about that category to be true is often how they've experienced it before. So if we advance one slide, I'm going to show you the relationship kind of profile of the market leader, which you can guess is Schweppes in this particular example. So almost identical picture. If you caught with a keen eye, I don't know, Serge, if you can toggle back and forth, performance and consistency are the only things which change between the category and the market leading brand. They're very, very, very similar. So when you're thinking about how to build your brand's relationship with people, think about what people need from the category, then think about where your competition is strongest. By doing those two things first, it'll help you understand where the open goal is. So if we advance one final slide, this is a brand on ProQuo doing something very, very, very different. the brand of Fever Tree, you know, obviously they're performing well on some of the drivers that people expect from the category. So they're doing well on accessibility. Their performance is pretty strong. They're popular. You know, people feel that they're quite familiar, but they're also majoring on, they're bringing an emotional sense of seduction through attraction to the market. And that's what they've really been hammering home through their packaging, through their communication, trying to stand out from the crowd and really disrupt the category. So depending on what your commercial objective is for your brand, in Fever Tree's kind of role, it's to disrupt and to really shake things up. They're able to build the relationship with their brand and construct it in a way that's going to kind of go against the grain and do something that's maybe less expected with their brand and market. So it is this kind of triangulation of what do people need in your category? How are your competitors currently satisfying those needs? And where does your brand fit within that triangle across those 16 drivers that are going to build a really powerful brand that people will love? And Sirish and I both just wanted to offer, for those that are here today, like we've obviously heard how to build a brand across the 16 drivers. There are things that are near and dear to ProQuo's hearts. And if anyone here wants to learn how to build a brand, well, how to build their brand's relationship with people, we're happy to have a one-on-one session looking at the drivers and talking to you about your brand. Feel free to like raise your hand if you want to have that. We'll take that offline with you directly, but we can take a look at the 16 drivers. We can have a chat with you. We can have a think about your category, and together we can kind of give you some advice on what actions you could take to really strengthen your brand's relationship with people. For sure, we'll be able to share a recording of the session as well as the slides. Those will come in a follow-up email from ProQuo following the session, either today, latest tomorrow. And are there any questions on the line? We've got a couple minutes left to go.
We had one from Shabani, which was, how big does your brand need to be to measure these 16 drivers with statistical significance? The answer is that we can measure any brand in the world, whether it's a musician or a more traditional brand or an influencer. If you're having a relationship with it, we can measure it basically with this system. We also had a hand up there. Someone put their hand up?
It might have been for a chat after.
Oh, for a chat after, okay.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys very, very much for joining us today. As I said at the start, we're ProQuo AI. We do these every month. We'd love for you to join our next session. It'll be, we don't have the date yet, but it's going to be mid-September. And we usually do these on a Thursday. So you'll get an email from us after this with the slides and the recording. And if anyone wants to figure out how to build their brand's relationship with Sirish and I, we're here to help. So thank you all for your time and have a great rest of the day and rest of the week.